Hey everybody, welcome back to our neck of the woods. So we've got another diesel truck video here for you guys. I was just gonna do some regular maintenance to show you guys just kind of a how-to so you're not paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars at the dealership. But as mentioned in the last video, someone commented and was like, holy crap, you did a lot of research. I learned a lot on the emission system. Well, the more I look into things, the more I see things, and I'm like, you know what, we can do this better. So instead of just some regular maintenance, we're gonna do some of that maintenance, but then we're also gonna do some upgrades. So come on inside and I'll show you what we got going on. All right, so the first thing that we were gonna do on the truck here today is at 75,000 miles, we're supposed to change out the CCV filter. Now, what is a CCV filter on this truck? Well, it's basically this filter right here. It goes underneath of the intake or valve cover there, and its job is to capture basically crankcase venting, like oily residue nastiness, before it gets sucked back into the intake system. So again, it lives under here, and we were simply just gonna unbolt this, bolt that new filter on, and we were going to be done. But I don't like the way the factory system is still set up. And the reason why is if you go back to this video right here, one of the first videos we did on this channel, you will know that on that Porsche Cayman S, we put on a brand new air oil separator, which I believe is no different than what this filter is right here. But because I had a cold air intake on that car, I had enough room in the engine bay to then put on a catch can. So from the bottom of the block, basically, you've got a hose that went up to the air oil separator. It then went into a catch can, and then it got routed back to the intake manifold. And if you look at me pouring out oil right there, that is after a brand new air oil separator again, and only 800 miles on having that catch can installed. And look how much oil is draining out after only 800 miles. So even though this is basically acting again as an air oil separator, you've got the crank venting going up probably through one of these lines right here. It gets captured in all of that like white carbon media and stuff, and then it probably drains back to the block. But I've got a feeling, even if we install this brand new filter on here, when that air goes through that filter, it leaves out a hose in the back right here, and then it drops down and goes into in front of the turbo there. So I've got a feeling if we cut that line and we tap in and put an oil catch can, I can almost guarantee we're gonna capture oily vapor just like we did on the Porsche. And that was, again, even after a brand new air oil separator on both. So I wanna see if that happens on this engine too, after we install that brand new one. So in this video, we're going to be putting on an oil catch can. We're gonna be replacing the intake because I want some more room in here, and I wanna hear that turbo whistle. So we've got a cold air intake on the way. Then we're gonna put on the catch can, and then we're gonna put on that filter. Now, the reason why I think it's important to go ahead and put a catch can or replace this guy earlier than not, we only have 59,000 miles on the car, but Ram says to replace this every 75,000, but that guy only cost me about $52. So since we're replacing it early, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. That's not a lot of money. But the reason why I think it's important to capture most of that stuff is because, again, when a crank is building up pressure, and the reason why a crank builds up pressure is because some of the air leaks past your piston rings when you're getting into that huge compression stroke. And then when you've got combustion, some of it leaks also past down through your piston rings. It mixes with your engine oil. That's why your engine oil turns black. And then all of that unburnt hydrocarbon and that black, nasty, oily residue and your carbon monoxide and nitric oxides, etc., all of that mixes in with your oil. And then because you have to vent that out of your block, in this particular engine, again, we're coming out obviously through that filter right there. But on a normal engine, you usually have like a PCV system or a positive crank ventilator valve. And that's basically just a one-way check valve that the air can go out and get back down into the intake. But if you have like a turbocharged car, you're not pushing air out of the intake when it's under boost and pre-pressurizing the block. So that's why you just have like a one-way check valve. This engine's set up a little bit different, but basically it's the same concept. You have to get that pressure out of your block, but you don't just want to vent it to atmosphere. I've seen a lot of people online basically just take that line from the intake to the turbo and they cut it. They put a plug on the turbo side, because obviously you don't want that just remaining open, because right here is your mass airflow sensor. And if you have a hole back there, you're going to be bringing in unmetered air into the engine, and your engine is going to be running really lean, and it's going to run like crap because more air is coming in than what the sensor is seeing. And then of course the engine's not going to add fuel to that, so it's going to run crazy lean. So most people, again, will just cut that line, put a plug on the turbo side, and then they'll put a breather filter on the intake side. Why is that not good? Well, for reasons that I already just said. Out of that filter, if you're allowing the engine oil down in the block to vape out into the atmosphere, you are going to be having some of your exhaust leak down through your piston rings and get into there. So you're going to be filtering out into the atmosphere where you can smell it in the cab. It's going to be, again, unburnt hydrocarbons. It's going to be carbon monoxide. It's going to be nitric oxides. It's going to be diesel soot smell, etc. You don't want to just vent that to atmosphere. Not to mention, it's not good for the engine or your engine bay. You can get that oily residue all over in here. Again, you're smelling crap, and your engine was not designed to just vent the crank or the block out into the atmosphere. It likes the turbocharger sucking the fumes out, or on any other naturally aspirated car, the intake is having a vacuum on it and it's sucking that out. It's not good for your engine seals and stuff to just go ahead and allow it to do it on its own without assisting it basically in a way. And a lot of people on this particular engine have actually thrown check engine lights because this filter media is so damn restrictive that if you don't have the turbocharger sucking that air out, then you have too much built up pressure in your block, and this thing will end up throwing a check engine light. Well, then people just say, screw it, and they take this off and they throw it in the trash and they never replace it. But again, that's not the way the engine was designed. You do not want to just be venting that to atmosphere for everything that I said. So just do your engine a favor and snip that line, put on a catch can that basically reroutes it back to the factory setup, but you've got one little extra device to basically see what you can capture and to keep your turbocharger, your boost tube, your front mount intercooler, your boost tube over on this side, and your throttle body. You just end up keeping it a hell of a lot cleaner. So I think, again, the way that I'm designing this and the way that I'm going to do it is just a hell of a lot better. And again, no different than what we did on the Porsche. So I've got to wait for my cold air intake to show up again. So hopefully we can get some more engine bay room to put on a catch can. And we'll probably have to make some sort of bracket so that we can set it somewhere. And again, hopefully it's just real easy to unscrew over time. And after like 1,000 miles, we'll see if we can get anything out, and we'll see if a brand new one is working or not. So stay tuned. I will be back in a few days when those parts show up, and we will go to the store and we're going to make our own catch can. And again, we'll see if this is worth it or not. So I will be back in a few days. Hang tight. All right, everybody, welcome back a few days later. All of our parts have shown up. So tonight we're going to get to start installing in some of them. And the most important is we got the cold air intake. Now, unfortunately, as I was looking into more things, I have found out that the Banks Engineering cold air intake could potentially cause us some check engine lights. Apparently, there's too much airflow. Banks hasn't figured it out, and many people have complained. It only happens when towing, and it's a really weird check engine light because it only happens to throw a code for like the ERG system. So that's kind of weird that an intake sensor over here bringing in too much air is causing the valve over here on the ERG to basically report too much airflow. So it's kind of weird. It doesn't hinder performance. It's an easy swipe of the check engine light to get rid of it, and then it comes back like a few thousand miles later. But like I said, the reason why I got it was to hopefully clear some more room up in here, because the way this air box is designed, this is a very big like intake tube right here, and we want to get this intake tube hopefully to like kick back a little bit. However, when I was looking at pictures online, it looks like where we want to put the oil catch can, kind of in this area right in here. It looks like there's less room on the standard outputs And we actually do have some room in here. I mean, my entire fist can fit in this area right here where we would want to install that anyway. So maybe the cold air intake was kind of pointless to buy. It's probably only gonna do what the cold air intake did on the Z, and that was add just a little bit of horsepower. I think at max that thing added about 13 horsepower and maybe 15 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't bad when you only have like a 300 some horsepower engine. And when I say that, I mean someone actually put a dually on a dyno and dynoed like 385, I think. So to only gain maybe like 10 horsepower, you're not gonna feel it. And the fact that we could be throwing check engine lights is gonna be kind of annoying more than anything. And another guy did a 44-mile test, bone stock, swapped the cold air intake on, did another 44-mile test, and he actually lost like 0.3 miles per gallon. So it really is going to do absolutely nothing. So it probably was a waste of money. But if we can gain a little bit of space in here, then I will be happy. So let's go ahead and get set up. Let's go ahead and just rip this guy off. It looks pretty simple. There's just one clamp down on the turbo. We might have to loosen the clamps like up here first to pull this back so we can take it out section by section. Then we'll unbox the Banks, we'll get it installed, and then we'll see if we do have some room to actually install a catch can in the place that I want to actually install it. All right, first time using this thing. Let's see if it actually holds and works. No, it doesn't. Do we have an aluminum hood? Really? The hood's made of aluminum? Ah, wait, we do have hooks also. Good job, Ram, saving a little bit of weight, making an aluminum hood. Now, one other thing I did notice, there is another crank breather. There's a little one on this side, which looks like it doesn't go to anything. It just drains down, like right down to the block. So I don't know what to do about that one. I guess technically you could install a catch can on that side too, but that line over there is like less than 1/2 inch in diameter. So that's gonna be too small to get in and out of any like real major catch can that you can buy. But the other weird thing I noticed about this breather filter over here that goes down to the turbo, while that line looks to be like 1 inch big, it's weird because the fitting on the turbo obviously has to go inside the hose, so it necks down. But then when you look down inside of the fitting, it necks down again to only like 3/8 inch. It's like very, very small, like a little bit of machined out on the inside of it. So that turbo may be sucking air very heavily through the filter and through that big line, but when it actually gets into the turbo, it's actually very, very small. All right, out with the old. As you saw, that was extremely easy. You just have 8 bolts, 3 plastic things that kind of just sit down over top of the studs. Don't forget to remove the oil cap because the cover will not come off. But yeah, that's what a old 59,000 crank filter looks like. And don't quote me, but I believe if you buy this from the dealership and it actually says Mopar on it, I believe this guy is like $160. I could be wrong on that. I got to go back. I'll actually say what it is right here. But if you actually look at it, it doesn't say Mopar. It actually says Fleet Guard on it. And that is the exact same filter that we bought for only like $52. So I would not be wasting my money on factory. But I gotta say, for 59,000 miles, I'm wondering if this thing was ever changed. And changed recently, because if you look down in there in like the cotton filter media, I was thinking that was going to be a lot more contaminated and thick and just overall just very, very nasty. And you cannot tell from like the blackness of the oil because diesel oil turns black like the second you start the car up and go to drive. So, but at least now I know and I can log it in my manual that we went ahead and changed it out at 59,000 miles. So I feel happy about that. I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit. It looks like there is a gasket in here. Mine did not come with it. So maybe that's the difference of Mopar to replace the gasket in there. But I don't think that gasket needs replaced. It looks like a rubberized, like silicone type of gasket going all the way around there. So yeah, I don't think it's warranted that it needs replaced. But yeah, just gonna clean this up real quick. We'll pop that back on. Then we'll go ahead and unbox our cold air intake and see what we're working with. All right, CCV filter done and done. And FYI, if you didn't notice, that filter or breather line over here that I'm talking about, it's actually not on the valve cover. It's down one more level, I think, like actually on the valve train or like the upper valve body. And again, wherever that leaks down to, that obviously has something coming out. But I'm not so much worried about that side, because if that's just breathing out that way and like going back down somewhere else, that doesn't bother me that much, because that is clearly or hopefully not connected anywhere on the intake system. That's what we're trying to avoid here. I don't want oil getting into the turbo, or again, getting into the hot boost tube, the front mount intercooler, or the cold boost tube, or going up anywhere here into the intake elbow. That's what we're trying to avoid. So whatever that one's doing and wherever it's going, basically, I just don't care. All right, now on to the cold air intake. The one thing I do want to say, when we took the cold air intake off of that car, we actually unplugged the mass airflow sensor, and I'm not sure which is which. One of these might be like a temperature sensor. One of them may be the mass airflow. Until I get in here, I don't know. But I do not want to just grab these and unplug these. I'm actually just going to unscrew them from the body, pull them out, and leave them connected. Because for whatever reason on the GM, and that being a 22 along with this being a 22, when I unplugged the mass airflow sensor with the car completely off, plugged it back in, it went into a hard limp mode, and me and the dyno operator could not get it to turn off. We tried disconnecting the battery. We put HP tuners on the car, not to tune it, but just to put it on the car to like read the check engine light, which of course was a mass airflow, but it would not reset. He actually spent like an hour trying to figure it out, and eventually he went and found another laptop with a different version of HP tuners. He was able to plug in, still see that there was a check engine light, and with that version, he was able to finally clear the code after like an hour. So Banks may say that in their instructions. I don't know, but I am just basically not going to unplug any electronics on a modern vehicle without either completely disabling the batteries and killing the power, because for some reason they are just too finicky. And I think they do it because the manufacturer wants to have a log. If you had a check engine light on a mass airflow sensor and then bring it in and the dealership reads that, they would be like, hey, why a year ago did that thing throw a check engine light on the mass airflow sensor? This thing probably had a cold air intake. And if I want to deny a warranty claim on that car, they could use that as ammunition. So the cold air intake on this car, I don't know if it's 50 state legal. I think it might be, but the manufacturers, I think they still don't care. This cold air intake could potentially void the warranty if a manufacturer or if the dealer was up in arms about it and did not want to change anything or replace anything for free. So that sucks, but it's a risk I'm willing to take to do some performance mods and to have just a more fun vehicle, and it's what we do. So if something happens, we'll have to pay for it or rip this thing out and replace it ourselves. So let's grab a Torx bit. Let's get these guys off. Let's completely disassemble the cold air or the factory intake, and then again we'll unbox that thing and get it installed. I did have to look back on the Carfax the dealership where I bought this truck. It was actually at a Ford dealership. Guys, I gotta say, they did do their work. I mentioned, I think before, that the fuel filter light on this truck was reset, or the miles at which it needs, they need changed out, or the percentage, etc. It was on the Carfax, not that the fuel filters were changed out, but there was something else that was changed out. I know the front brake pads from memory that were changed out by a Ford dealership taking in a freaking Ram. But guys, I think they did a full service on this truck. It doesn't look like the brake fluid was changed out because that is nasty and black looking. The coolant on these trucks don't look like they need changed out, but that's also looking pretty nasty. I think it's maybe over 100,000 miles, but that fluid's looking pretty nasty. But come on, that is a brand new filter. And now I am definitely thinking that that crankcase filter was changed out too. So they really did a number on this truck. Congratulations to a freaking Ford dealership for taking in a used truck and doing that amount of work to something that you really didn't have to. They could have just changed the oil or not and just turned around and sold it to me. So I have got to give kudos to them for that. But let's continue with this install and see if we can get the rest of this stuff completely pulled out and removed. All right, so big old massive intake tube. Looks like it's got an air diverter in there with 4 chambers to try and help speed the flow or change flow, keep the flow steady. That's funny though. We got like a 5-inch intake in this massive looking turbo. But when you look down inside of there, we've got just this little itty bitty, like maybe 2.5-inch intake instead. And if you want to see the results of the hose right here for the crank filter, if we look at the inside of the turbo, as you can see, you do get nasty stuff down in there. It's not thick. It's like a very thin type of paste. So there is a little bit of accumulation of actually wet oil right there. So this again is what we are trying to stop here. But that's crazy, such a large turbo with such a large neck right here. And it just necks down so small onto this velocity stack here that that inlet is just so small. Turbo spins good though, and there's no shaft play. So let's continue. But it looks like we have our own new intake housing kinda. And yeah, that's a little bit difference in size. We're going from 5 inches to probably up to 10 inches of intake. So no wonder why the airflow is increased. Again, I don't know what the surface area of the factory filter is. Obviously you saw it was very thick, very restrictive. But this guy here, that's like well over 5 inches. This is like the largest filter I've ever seen in my life. It is an oiled K&N filter. So I'm sure we can replace this one day if need be, if it gets too dirty. But with K&N filtration, you usually can just hose it down, put cleaner all over it, and then you can re-oil it very lightly so you don't screw up your mass airflow sensor. But Banks did have the option to use a dry filter also, but I've just always used an oiled filter on every car I've ever owned. I've never had a mass airflow sensor check engine light or anything. I've never over-oiled my filter, and with enough oil analyses that I've done over the year, I know that because this thing is letting in more airflow, it can let in more dirt and particles, etc. But I've never had a problem in my oil analysis say that I've got an over-contamination of dirt. So I am not worried about this. But I also do not live in an area where I'm constantly sucking in like mud and dirt and everything. I'm just doing regular driving down the highway, etc. So this thing should be more than enough filtration that we need, even though, again, this thing's going to increase airflow by like an absolute crap ton versus how much more restrictive a factory paper filter can be. All right, so hopefully, as you can see, again, we're getting a much, much smaller intake tube. This thing is a hell of a lot smaller. It may be the same width this wise, but this way it is only like that thick. So our factory intake was probably out to here. So we are gaining probably like 2 or 3 inches to where this thing is gonna bolt down to the turbo and hopefully push this thing more forward so we have more room. And then of course we have a new intake elbow to attach to here that will attach to the turbo. We are kind of relocating our temperature sensor and mass airflow sensor from up here way down further, closer to the turbo. So there are a few differences. But besides that check engine light that people have been complaining about when they're towing heavy, if Banks ever comes out with their like on-the-fly tuner that still says it's coming soon for every diesel car, maybe when they get that thing finally up and running, they'll be able to adjust some of the fuel that's coming in versus how much air is coming in, and then it won't be a problem in the future. But as far as I know, they are still working on a self-programmer with emissions on tuning for these things to run better and to get more power, etc. So much more room for activities. All right, well, looking in here now, it is very easy to replace the factory boost tubes if you ever want to, but I really don't think it's worth it, honestly. Banks does sell a bigger hot pipe and cold pipe going from the turbo to the intercooler. They are bigger. These factory ones are made of steel, and of course they just have a rubberized clamp on each side. But I really don't see the point. If the turbo exit is, let's say, only 2.5 inches, it looks like this pipe going all the way to the intercooler is 2.5 inches. And then whatever that side is over there going up to the factory, like throttle valve over here, why would you want to go from small to large, back to small, go through the intercooler, go large again, only to neck back down again? With the factory boost tubes, everything's kind of like the exact same size, so I don't see there's a point to go, again, like up and down and up and down and up and down. I think that would only hurt airflow. So I do not think that's a Banks product we'll be getting. But as for this elbow over here, with the notorious failing of some of the factory grid heater bolts on this side, we may be purchasing that guy just so we don't explode a motor. And yes, I do have 41,000 miles left on a warranty, but why would I want my truck to blow up and to be in a shop for months on end getting a new motor installed? That is, if of course, they don't mind that the cold air intake is on here. Banks does provide some Loctite with the kit. You do get new screws. You are putting metal screws now into like a brass fitting that's on this guy, so you won't be reusing these plastic kind of like self-tapper type screws. All right, we are dry fitted. I gotta say, that's not the easiest thing. That kind of sucks. If you ever want to change out this filter, it looks like it's going to be a huge pain in the butt. You have to lower the bottom piece and take that off. You've got to unplug or unscrew both of the sensors. And then like this whole thing comes out. But I guess you got a window to look down in here to see when the filter gets dirty, like when it's time to replace it. But holy crap, you have to remove all of this just to change out the filter and clean it off. So there should be like a better cover over on here to basically unbolt this thing. That way you can get into the filter and take it off. So that is kind of a huge pain in the butt. But we're dry fitted right now. I haven't screwed anything down yet. We do have to figure out how to take this ram part off with that rubber right there, get it back installed over here. And then that way I think we have some airflow still into here, if I'm not mistaken. I got to read the instructions. But I'm going to go ahead and snug all this down. And as for fitment now, it looks like we did gain a little bit of room down in here. So we do have a little bit of room to play with to see if we can get a catch can in here somewhere. But I'm going to play with fitment real quick on this guy and get it bolted down, and then we'll work on the catch can. All right, Banks cold air intake is installed. That thing was very greasy, so we're gonna clean it up a little bit. But now on to the catch can. I basically bought the exact same catch can that was on the Porsche, and it's simply just a plastic, little plastic housing with threads on each side so you can put whatever type of fitting you want. And down inside is a micro like mesh screen to basically separate the air and the oil. Now it shows you on the direction which way the airflow will go. This thing has 150 PSI max on it, so I am not worried about basically installing this on an engine bay. I don't think it's going to shatter and break apart. It's a very thick and hard plastic, but we do have to figure out basically where this thing's going to go because we are limited on space. Not to mention we are coming out of a spot that's going straight up and then a spot that's coming like straight at us. So obviously the factory tube works quite well because it's got all the proper bends and everything. But now we got to figure out how do we come up straight out of a turbo and be able to get in here somewhere and come sideways out of there, and again, go in straight in here. So I've got some fittings over here that I'm gonna play with for a little bit to see if we can make it work. If I can't make it work, then we're probably gonna have to go to the store, maybe get some extra hose with some different bends or make our own bends, etc. But I gotta play with this for a little bit to figure out how exactly I'm gonna get this guy to fit and work. All right, so what it looks like I'm gonna have to do is this is the factory location that goes up from the turbo and goes to the crank. What I'm gonna do is take this bottom piece and trim it down a little bit, and I'm gonna spin it towards this direction. This is gonna sit over top of it like this, and then I'm gonna take this 90 here, put it on this hose here, so that way it goes like that and it goes up onto this side, and this will be returning to the turbo. But this screw-on fitting here, instead of it being straight, I basically need to buy a 90. So when we screw this on, it's gonna come out of here and go straight down, and then with a little piece of hose, we'll go to this 90, to this 90, and that will attach this part. And then this guy is facing right towards the crank or the filter part, where we just need a long hose to basically attach over to here and then here. I don't think this is gonna be long enough, so we may just have to replace this piece altogether or tap in here with a little bit of an extension of a piece of hose. Unless one of these extension pieces can work, I'll just have to cut this guy up basically and make it work. But yeah, that'll basically sit right back almost in the factory location where we come straight into here, and then we 90 down, 90 over, and then we go back into the turbo, and that's just with the constraints that we're working with. But that should be very easy to do. So before our first test drive with the cold air intake, it looks like we're just gonna make a run to the store, and then I will be back shortly. All right, peoples, back from the store. Gonna finish this project up, meow. A couple things that dawned on me when I was out. Number one, I see a lot of people using Teflon tape. They use the wrong kind. White Teflon tape is made for water. Yellow Teflon tape is made for gas and oils. So I see too many people all the time using white on like gasoline and stuff, or like on your house stuff, like on your furnace. They're using like white Teflon. Don't use white Teflon. It's not made for gas and oils. Yellow is specifically made for it. So just a little hint there for you. The other thing, there's probably people screaming at their TV right now, and they're probably saying something like, Scott, it doesn't make sense to do it this way. I basically just got a bunch of like heater hose and attached it to the crank, and I ran that all the way under the truck. So that way I didn't have to like smell anything or get oil vapor like all over everything. And yes, that would 100% would work and would not be a problem at all. However, this is basically about $20 some to purchase, while I just saw heater hose 3/4 inch because I needed a little bit at the store. 50 foot of that stuff was almost $90 plus tax, so you're looking at close to like $100 just for some heater hose. And if you need about 15 feet, let's say, to drop down and go at least back far enough like under the cab so you're not smelling anything, well, that's also going to cost you about $27. So it doesn't make sense to just do it that way when you can do it this way and actually capture everything. And again, you're going to be having a vacuum pulled on the car versus, again, just kind of naturally letting it like vent to atmosphere. So I still think this way is better. And then the other thing I know someone's going to say, they probably do make a catch can out there designed for this engine. I did look at some, I think I only found some universals, and they were like $300 or $400. And the reason why I don't like expensive kind of aftermarket catch cans, or I mean, I guess technically this is an air oil separator. The reason why I don't like those is because they're made of metal, and a lot of people complain in wintertime that their catch cans always fill up. Well, that's because you've got a metal object that's hollow, that's been sitting out all night, that's probably like -degrees Fahrenheit. And when the engine starts to run and you're blowing hot oil vapor through these things, you form a crap ton of condensation, which of course now you're making like chocolate milk with a bunch of water and oil, and it ends up looking like very brown, etc. Well, plastic I don't think is going to condensate as much or as hard as like metal would. So I just think that this way that, again, we're doing it is just the best way. But you can do what you want and report back and let me know. But I still think this is the way that we're going to do it because it just works. All right, catch can part 1, kind of mocked up design. Going to make sure everything fits and get those hoses cut right. we'll be able to just pop this guy on. And then I did sacrifice the factory hose. I cut it up into several pieces. The part coming out of the turbo is now this guy right here, just because I wanted like basically a 90-degree bend. I cut about that much off of it, so I don't know, maybe 1.25 inches off of it, so it sits a lot lower. So this hose now runs under the catch can, which will be this bottom 90 right here. And then we're gonna still use the factory part where it has a little bit of a bend because we have to get around the ERG valve, and the cover, it actually like doesn't come straight out. It actually goes up at an angle. So it kind of bends out and around. And then I got another spacer to connect some heater hose that will go from here. And then we've got like a butt connector, which will connect to this one. And that should finish the entire route. So let's slap her on and take it for a test drive. All right, people, all done. It may not be pretty. I did have to use some zip ties, but I'm not an engine bay guy, so I don't give a crap. But as you can see, we used factory clamps back here. We've got a mid connector right there. We're going over to the catch can. It drops down there, 90s, goes underneath of the catch can and goes back to the turbo, again, using the factory connectors. So it is sealed. It will, or should, 100% work. It is up a little bit high. I kind of used another zip tie to put it to that upper tower brace there. So that way it stays high and it's like level. Our directional flow is going the right way. And because we are up a little bit, it should be easy for me just to reach in there and unscrew and check it out when need be. But let's make sure we don't have any check engine lights. I may go out on a test drive. It's really raining out right now. There's a lot of water on the road, so it's probably gonna be too loud to hear. But we may not hear any turbo noise anyway, so I won't record if basically I can't hear anything. If you guys can hear it. Oh yeah, there it is. Again, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but that turbo whistles the whole time. Unfortunately, on a diesel truck, or at least on this Cummins engine, we do not have a blow-off valve because this truck has no throttle body. There is a flapper valve, I guess, on the intake kind of elbow, but there is actual no closing throttle body when you let off the throttle, so there's no reason to relieve the pressure in the boost tubes to actually have a blow-off valve. But while you're driving it down the road and it is shifting through the gears, you can hear that puppy whistle pretty loud. Under factory conditions, that was 100% quiet. You couldn't hear a thing. So I guess yay for me. You don't get any maybe horsepower, you may not get any mile per gallon, but at least you get some noise and a better, cleaner running engine. We're just missing the choo-choo-choo-choo. But there you have it. I'm happy with it. If you guys learned something, comment down below. Like the video if you want to see more of the Dodge. We've got a few more things that we have to do here. We found one tire on Facebook Marketplace for the exact size and manufacturer and model that I want to use. So I still have to purchase 5 more or 6 more if we want to do the spare tire also. So 7 freaking tires on this thing. We'll get those installed. They are bigger than factory, so this truck is gonna get a little bit taller and they look a lot more aggressive. We've got to do the factory ISN transmission change, so we're at 60,000 miles, so basically we got to have that done. But stay tuned and I will get those videos out to you guys and we'll go from there. So until next time, take care.